We're just beginning to enter a period of drought. It's probably drought light in our half-acre landscape and the space next door that we work. On our 6-acre site in Trumansburg, New York, we've gotten a lot less rain there. It trends on dry years to be less rainy overall in that landscape. That place is feeling profoundly, stressfully dry already. We're running low on rainwater. Things are going to be kept alive, I'm sure, but it's a whole lot more work. So my thoughts start going towards what makes it possible to navigate these seasons. Last season was really wet and cool, lovely, that's easy. 2016 was a crushingly, record-shatteringly dry growing season. 2020 was really dry, and this year is shaping up to feel that way too. What are some strategies to get through a season like that? Let me explain some ideas. In this video, I'd like to make an argument for the idea of committal to deep mulch as a way to navigate profoundly dry moments. I think if you're in extremely limited rainfall areas, this video would be particularly of value. In areas like ours, some seasons are really wet, and so then the mulch would be challenging, but it's easy enough to move that aside and turn it into compost, build soil, etc., and take the mulch off. But I am so pleased that we committed to an intense amount of mulch in this landscape this spring. Let's look at and compare and contrast mulched areas versus non to see why there's such value in this. I also want to be clear that when I'm talking about mulch, I am not trying to be prescriptive about it must be this type of hay from this source and this size and blah, blah, blah. It's wood chips if that's what you can find. It's hay, ideally, critically, not sprayed, not chemically laden, if that's what you can find. It's leaf bags if that's what you can find. Sawdust if you get the idea. Maybe you're growing your own mulch, your own straw and hay in the form of scythed areas or annual crops that are meant to be laid down. It's just a universal term of covering the soil with a protective shield of organic matter that takes a little while to break down. That's the mulch I'm talking about here. If we look at our neighbor's landscape here, you can see how much hay is happening right around this high tunnel and these gardens. This spring, I brought in 6 round bales of hay. It was $200 for them in total, with the delivery included, which to my mind was well worth it. It's going to create extremely high quality soil in the long run. It's reduced weeding down to nearly zero. I have not hand weeded in here at all. And the soil quality is amazing, and as we get drier it gets better. But let's look not at the mulched area first, but an area that has been bare soil since the spring. If we take a wander over to the pond, we'll do an update video on that at some point soon, but it's definitely dropping, but it's still getting fed from underneath. The spring that feeds this pond is still alive and well. It's just starting to get sluggish. But near the pond, we have some examples of bare soil. I don't think it's fair to analyze the soil that's right next to the pond because that is subsoil that's been exposed. But there's some areas here. This, believe it or not, was topsoil. It had been regraded this spring and smoothed out, but this was the same quality soil as the soil we're building our garden beds right over there. And let's take a look at that. This has been in the full sun since the spring. Not intentionally, it's just what happens sometimes. At this point, I could not imagine, unless we had a number of inches of rain, being able to establish any sort of crop in this season. We use rainwater that we collect to irrigate. There's no way we'd be able to keep up with the amount of watering needed to have crops grow in here. This is the topsoil of this landscape exposed to sun through the beginning of a drought. Same basic soil, but in the spring applied a very deep layer of hay. Again, I'm not trying to say an exact number. In our case, it might have been anywhere between 4 and 6 inches of loosely flaked hay. But let's just choose a random spot, nothing in particular. Remember the soil from before. As we move this hay aside, there is not compost that was put down this spring. There's not anything different that happened. It's the same exact soil, but this was covered in hay. We didn't water this either, so this received the exact same amount of rainfall. I don't think I saw worms over there. I saw dust, I saw stones, That worm is not pleased with this demonstration, so we'll put that back. I could pretty easily take this and squeeze water out of this if I chose to. I imagine pulling hay back now, seeding out annual crops, and having them actually be able to germinate despite the lack of any rainfall, especially if I put some of this hay back. In fact, about a week ago, I started what I think I'd like to do as my main experiment for this late summer and fall is to take that tool or my hands and simply pull hay back in certain areas and take stalks of seeds from plants that have bolted this year. So in this case, this is mustard, and just grind it up a little bit and let the seeds simply drop into the slightly exposed soil. Put some hay back as a mulch and leave the stalk as my plant marker. So I'll keep an eye out for brassica seedlings in here. Maybe we'll water them a few times, but if we get any rains, all I'll simply do is move this aside and apply a light flaking of, you guessed it, to protect that soil. I want to look at another area that got way deeper mulch, even deeper than that. And here we are on the west side of the high tunnel. This area, it's a small amount of space. You can see in front of me, I would guess 100, 200 square feet, maybe in total. And this received one full round bale of hay, so kind of an obscene amount. I imagine this to be a garden bed once we come back into rains in the fall. You can see here, I don't know that I would necessarily suggest that this is the right amount of mulch. This might be a little bit much, but it did zero out the weeds entirely. And down in there, we've got some beautiful soil. Now, since this is hay, there's an immense amount of seeds in this. So what I would do best to do here is not do this sort of disturbance. This is for demonstration purposes only, but rather come with nice transplants of established cabbages, lettuces, kales that are good and happy. Pull the mulch aside, transplant them in, water them, and put the mulch back. Preserve the water, and also don't open up the context to be able to have easy light for all the seed load that's in this hay. Less of an issue with wood chips, but certainly hay, if this was all raked off and left alone, would this be an immense amount of grasses growing right here. I should say I'm pretty clearly aware that there are lots of variations to this theme, and there's also lots of reasons why hay may not work for you. I'm sure in the comments you could list 100 different reasons why you would not like hay or wood chips or sawdust in your landscape, and that's fine. I'm not trying to sell people on doing something they don't want to do, so I just want to be clear about that. I don't have an Amazon affiliate link for round bales of hay, but in our site on dry, hot years, we've found an abundance of mulch in the form of hay, ideally for us, and wood chips, if that's what we can get for free, has in 2016 made it possible for our nursery to not collapse under the pressure of desiccation, and in 2020 allowed us to have decently large crops and good production for our nursery and food for ourselves, and hopefully this year navigate an intense dry moment. I still have my fingers crossed that maybe we do get some great rains, and that would be lovely. It's not incompatible with this deep mulch. It can work its way through and hydrate the soil. Way more important in my mind than just the idea of always mulching is to also be considering the moving up of succession. We've got our perennial elements here, the shrubs and trees, the elderberries, the seaberry that went in 2 years ago. They, at this point, with the deep mulch around them, seem to care less about whether it rains or not. And that's a great reminder that annuals are exquisite and wonderful and have extremely high value in many, many ways. And the more you can develop your landscape to have perennial herbaceous elements, deep tap-rooted plants like this comfrey here, shade-tolerant plants next to sun-loving plants to the north of them, all those different layers of design and complexity beget a lot more benefit. But the mulch in the meantime, especially in annual cropping systems or newly disturbed sites, has been in the realm of profoundly critical for us to navigate extremely hot and dry growing seasons.